This is Lou Adler. Hey, JJ, I have a question for you, though. Can everybody see the results of the poll, or am I the only one who sees the results of the poll?
You have to share the results of the poll.
See, I don't show that button here. Maybe it's when I close the poll. I'm going to close the poll now. It's kind of, so let's see if that works. Oh, there it is. Okay, close it so we can see it. This interesting poll is that 25% of the group is job seekers, and certainly we're going to cover some of that stuff. Another 17% planning a career move, and certainly it's useful for that. It's obviously useful for selecting people. That's actually how I developed it. It was more for selecting people. And it turns out you can use the same process for your own team, improving communication and building the team. So this is where we're going to go here. I'm going to hide the results, close the poll, suggest that a couple of things. I think we're going to send an email to everybody with a link to the recording when we have it done. So we're also going to use the hashtag 4jobs if anybody wants to tweet this stuff going on here. I don't know if anybody's going to be monitoring it. JJ, you might want to monitor that, see if there's any interesting questions come through that way. I'm going to ask JJ to monitor the questions. I can't see them. I mean, I can see them very briefly come through here, and I can only see the last one. So if there's any questions, JJ, that you think are pretty cool, let's make sure that we do that. What is that one? Can Lou have a, what is that?
Oh, I think that's
unfortunately, I don't have a headset, so that's I talk worse with a headset. So hopefully you can hear me reasonably well. Do I always sound like I'm in a tunnel, JJ, or isn't the way I normally talk, right?
No, yeah, you actually sound fine. So
okay.
I'm taking care of this one.
Actually, I've actually thought about going in the tunnel, which would clear that problem up. But and the humor on this program is no better than that, so don't expect much more than that. But I do want to kind of start on how this whole process developed. And the book that I wrote, The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired, is really kind of a strange book. Because most of the work I do is actually with corporations, training hiring managers and training recruiters, but most of them don't follow the rules. So I said, let me write a book that for both recruiters and hiring managers, but also embed in that same book ideas that job seekers can use to make sure that they're interviewed and assessed properly. So that's the essential guide. It was not easy to write, but put it together that way. Let me kind of go through this process so you get at least a sense of what I want to talk about. And when I train recruiters and hiring managers, I say you got to think backwards. More hiring problems are created by the way most people set up their processes. And the way I look at it is that there are really 4 buckets of decisions. The having bucket is what's on the skills, what's on your resume, skills, experiences, and all this other kind of stuff. It's also what's on the job description. It's what people have. And then the next step is when recruiters start finding people, they always ask, and candidates ask, hey, what do you get? And candidates want to know what's the money, what's the location, what's the job title, who's the company, and lots of decisions are made on having and getting. But what's interesting is that after 2 or 3 weeks where a candidate has full knowledge of the job and the company has full knowledge of the candidate, the having and getting isn't all that important. You don't have to have the exact skills if you're really a good performer. You might give up a little bit on compensation if it's a real good career move, or the company might modify the job a little bit. So there's a lot more flexibility when the assessment's made on doing and becoming. Unfortunately, that's not the way the hiring process works. They advertise job descriptions, candidates want to know what they get, and yet when they get past that, actually the right decision is made. So the obvious solution is to focus on doing and becoming first. That's not easy to do because we have systems built up on matching, on having and getting. And that to me is a fundamental problem. It's the way the information is, and I got to say, for my whole career has been reversing this process, and it's not, and inertia wants to go left to right, reality should go right to left. So I just want to set that as the stage here as we go forward. Any questions yet, JJ, that are interesting? I just asked that. Hopefully there's maybe one, but I don't know that. No,
there's one question. How do you determine which of the 4 types a team has and which type should they hire?
That's a fair question. So we're going to do that. So let me kind of get to that. I was a softball, I think. So what I do, so let's kind of set the stage for how I do this. I'm going to take it from the perspective of me as a recruiter. And let me just say this. I am no longer a recruiter. I do not do that. We train recruiters. We train hiring managers around the world now. But I am no longer a recruiter. And I do get lots of resumes every day, and there's nothing I can do with them. But when I was a recruiter, I would always be given a job description, which lists skills, which is the having. They got to have this. They got to have that. They got to do this. And I always said to managers, that's not a job description. That's a person description. Let's put the job description in the parking lot for a minute and let's define the work. That kind of got most hiring managers, but that's what I did. Because think about it. You can have all of these skills and experiences and not be competent to do the work or motivated to do the work. In addition, there's a lot of great people who can do the work who don't have those skills and experience. So to me, this having bucket is the biggest bottleneck we have. We even have laws about that. Now, I talked to the number one attorney in the country, labor law attorney, says, no, there's other ways. While that's objective criteria, it's not very predictive. So what I do is I say, managers, let's define the doing before the having. So that's how I start making the shift. Let's put the person in the parking lot. Let's define the work. And the work always is a series of action verbs: do, build, create, change, stuff, grow sales, launch products. And when you think about it, what I try to do is I put these in priority order. And when I ask hiring managers, who would you rather hire, someone who can do the work or someone who has the skills, they all, we've trained 10, 20,000 hiring managers the last 20 years, so I've got a lot of statistics on it. 100% of the time, they say they'd rather hire someone who can deliver the work, who can do the work. So I said, why don't we define that first? Because the performance determines the skills you need. Having the skills doesn't determine performance. 100% correlation. If someone can do the work, they have exact skills. Just because they have the skills doesn't mean they're motivated or competent to do the work. So, and to me, this is the big bottleneck with the unemployed, with diversity issues. When you define the work, you just open up the pool to so many different people. That's thinking backwards. It's what you do with what you have, not what you have, that counts. So that's really the start of this whole process of thinking backwards, defining the work as accomplishments, not necessarily skills. So that's the first step. From here, the way I actually do it, that's the concept. The way I actually do it, which is the 4 work types I put into that blog piece, I just ask managers. So now I'm actually talking to a hiring manager. Okay, so I break the conversation down. I finally get them to put the job description in the parking lot. I said, what do they do most of the time? What's repeatable work they've got to do real well? How do they use their skills on the job? And they say stuff. Oh, they got to be, most of the job they'll be designing ASIC type circuits that do this, this, and that. So they're using skills. I call that the producer job. They've got to be good at it, but that's the producer job. Then I said, is there anything about the job they've got to improve, upgrade, develop, enhance? Is there some existing process or existing team that needs to get better? And sometimes, hey, yes, they do. They have to build the team. We've got a current team of sales reps. They're all kind of newbies. We've got to really get them up to speed very quickly. Well, that's an improver role. They've got to review a certain process and upgrade it to reduce cost. Those are improver jobs, taking some function that already exists or team that exists and make it better. Then I start changing a little bit. I said, is there anything big that they got to solve? Turn around a business, launch a new product line. They got to just take something that hasn't been done before, has been done poorly, and really do some kind of creative aspect about it. I call that the builder job, which is big. There's not something there you're improving. You're almost taking something that doesn't exist and making it, which is a significantly different role. Yeah, oh yeah, we got to launch this new product. We've never launched this product. We got 6 months to do it. Normally it would take a year. This person's just going to have really strong project management skills, got to make it happen. Well, that's a different job than an improver job. Then I said, well, what are some big problems they got to solve? Biggest problem they got to solve. And sometimes the problems are small problems. And that maybe wouldn't be a capital T, but every job has problems you got to solve. But I want to understand, is this really the key part of the job? Is there a strategy they're thinking of? Yes, we want to launch this whole new product line in a new territory we've never been before. Well, could you apply this to what you do in the United States internationally? No, it wouldn't work because the distribution channels are different. Okay, so that's big time thinking. If it's, hey, we're just going to duplicate what we've done in the United States and launch it in Europe, well, that's kind of, it's not insignificant, but it's not, doesn't require a total rethinking of the process. So when I get a manager to think this way, we probably come up with 6 or 8 or 10 different performance objectives. Then we put them in priority order. Okay, what's most important, what's second most, and usually 1 or 2 of these things dominate. Sometimes it turns out, I say, hey, you know, you got a project for 3 months that's really huge. And then you get the rest of it for the next 10 years, the job's pretty much improver producer. So why don't we just get a consultant then to do the first part, get that launched, and then we can, because many times you can't find a person who can do all the things required in the job. So now when you start with the job and look at it, managers can say, what about we have people on the team? We can start looking at it from that perspective. So that's where this whole concept developed. Let me kind of show you.
Hey, Lou, a couple of questions before we move on, and they're all kind of related. But do you think that some roles straddle 2 or more of the role types, or can you have a combination of role types?
Oh, they all, let's say this, yes. A producer is always thinking. If you're sitting on a production line, or even you're in a call center, which might be a producer job, and you think a better way, this screen is weird. Why am I taking these 3 calls doing it this way? Why don't we do that? It's certainly taking an improver job. Or they get a call from a customer, and the customer can't figure it out, and they solve a problem. So yes, every single job has components of them. And there's always a blend. And I was actually, somebody said, there was on the blog post that I wrote, somebody said, well, what about a consultant job? They don't do anything. Well, that's not true. But you think about a consultant, they're certainly thinking, hopefully, big time. And they have to have a certain set of skills. So a consultant is typically a thinker and a producer. Now, sometimes you're implementing a new system. You get PricewaterhouseCoopers implementing a logistics system while they're doing the building too and the improving. So yes, most jobs are a mix and match of all of them. What I try to do from my perspective as a recruiter is highlight the most important. But there's very few jobs you're just a robot doing one aspect of it. So it's a very fair question. And again, I started by, it was roles in the job as opposed to people. Just because you're a thinker doesn't mean you're a good thinker. I mean, this is actually kind of, if you're familiar with this, guys, I remember, this is probably 20 years ago now, maybe more, I just asked the candidate, and I got to tell you, he wasn't the greatest candidate in the world, but I said, well, what do you think your greatest strength is? It was just probably a setup question. And he said he was an ENTJ, which in Myers-Briggs is an extrovert, well, I didn't want to go through the legit names of it, I can't remember, but an ENTJ. Extroverted, intuitive, thinker, judger, something like that. I said, what does that mean? You might not be a very good, and that's not a strength, that's a style of managing. You could be a terrible ENTJ. I said, well, tell me about your biggest ENTJ accomplishment. And it was pretty superficial. So it's what you do with your skills that counts. It's just like, what do you want done? So when somebody tells me, hey, they got to have 10 years of this, I said, what do they do with 10 years of it? What does that look like on the job? I can't measure 10 years of that. And you got 6 people interviewing the candidate. They're all going to interpret that 10 years a different way. What do they do with that 10 years experience? Oh, they have to design a battery circuit that reduces consumption by 50%, and we need 10 years experience because we got to get it launched within 3 months. Now that's something different. So then I say to the man, well, if I can find somebody who's got 1 year of experience but can get the thing launched in 3 months, are you still willing to talk to them? Oh, sure I would. So it's the idea that we focus too much on things and not outcomes. It's what you do with what these skills that counts. And all this, the 4 job types, which are legitimate, were developed to get managers to think about the work, not about the person. I always say, define the work before you define the person. You talk to most managers, say, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a new sales manager. And he's got to have 7 years of this, 4 years of this, and 2 years of that, and a degree from here. And I said, wait. Let's define the work before we define the person. Oh, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I mean, why would you define the person first? It's a job description. It's not a person description. So let me kind of give you this. This is, last week I was doing another training session for somebody, and I just started to look at some job descriptions. I don't know how I found, this is a major company, and you can't read it, or maybe you can, you wouldn't want to read it. This was only a third of the job description. I just looked, I think I looked up systems engineers in Silicon Valley or Southern California, I can't remember, and this was what came up. This was, and actually there was a lot more gobbledygook than this. This was probably the middle third. Let me just look at it. Knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for the telecommunications systems engineer. Strong organizational skills, must be customer focused. Preferred candidate will have experience with IP networking infrastructure technology, but most importantly with cellular 3G, 4G packet, and then there's all this other stuff here. Direct and fluent experience with 2 of the 3, with all 3 being ideal. Who the heck writes this garbage? I mean, it's just almost incomprehensible that, number one, a candidate's going to find it, who's going to find it, and who's going to want to do it. You got to be an idiot to want to do this work. 3 years, at least, no requirements. 3+ years industry experience working as an equipment vendor and a proven track record of taking complex engineering. Give me a break here. But when you ask the hiring manager what the work is, same exact job, I say, well, what is the work? Well, here's what I do. Here's what I tell job seekers. If you're ever constructed with this, as soon as you get a call with a recruiter, you got to ask them, hey, tell me what the job is. Don't box check my skills. Ask, what are some challenges? What are the technical issues? What does a person need to do? What's the emphasis of the job? How will the person be evaluated? That's how I would convert it. If you're a job seeker looking for a job, don't let them get into this kind of silly discussion. If you're a recruiter, don't let your managers do it. And if you're a manager, how could you possibly do this and expect to find a good person? I actually talk like this to my clients, guys. It makes no sense. It's so frustrating. And you see, I talked to the top attorney in the world, and I said, yes, he said, that's legal, but it's useless. I asked the same lawyer, let me get to here, he said, this is objective criteria, and it's also predictive. The blue is objective, allowed, but it's useless. So when I look at this job, I didn't talk to the hiring manager, but I placed me a systems engineer. My early background was an engineer, so it was really easy for me to figure this one out. Here's the real job. When you read between the lines, it's collaborate with sales reps to develop customer solutions at major companies. That's a big job, and it's important. This is the technical person who's going to liaison with big $5 to $10 million projects. It's got to be the technical person there. So the person's obviously, in my mind, largely a producer providing advice and maybe an improver there, but largely a producer. He's got a real technical skills. Lead intense detailed product specs. So this is where they got to put some pretty cool thinking level things. How are you going to, so they're taking a product and they're making presentations to big buyers who are going to spend $5 to $10 million on changing their whole telecommunications infrastructure. From a technical standpoint, they do provide from the customer, they're the conduit between the customer and the internal engineering team. They also work with finance and contracts and pricing to put all this stuff together. And they're consistently handling 3 to 6 major projects. Now, if these 3 to 6 were really challenging and never been done before, that would probably be a builder kind of a role. But maybe that's just an improver. How do you process? How do you prioritize? This is stuff that managers tend to do. And here's a technical part, assess the impact of spec changes. The point of it is the part on the right is a good job. I as a recruiter can find people, can assess people to do that. The part on the left is a bunch of gobbledygook, random luck if you ever find somebody to see it. Why would a good person even want to do it? Now, if the stuff on the right, that's a career move. I could sell that as a recruiter. I could sell as a career move. If any of you guys want to do that, I don't know what the company was. I probably could track it back. But the point is, when you understand what people need to do, the assessment process changes. I need people who can collaborate with sales reps to develop customer solutions. Hey, that's what you got to do. And I tell my clients, I won't compromise on that. Won't compromise. You got to do that. I totally support that. But if the guy's got 3 years or 7 years, a woman has got a background in a slightly different industry doing very similar, you need to see that person. Let's stop there. We need some real questions now, JJ. So let's get into the question period.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions regarding hiring managers. And Jonathan said that you make it sound very easy, but what about hiring managers that constantly revert back to the X years of experience and certain degrees who just can't wrap their brains around defining the work? How do you overcome that hurdle?
Well, let's say this, and they shouldn't, I tell them, I tend to be a little bit, I grew up in the Bronx, guys. I worked in manufacturing. I broke through union lines. I just happen to also like recruiting. So I have because I also have an engineering background, I can at least get through it. But what I tend to do is, when we do this in our recruiter training, we train recruiters around the world, I say, first work with one manager who does get it and prove that the process works. But also, even when you work with any managers, don't go into the meeting cold with a job description. Go in with a rough template of something like this. Like if I was, now, hold on guys, sorry. If I was actually taking this assignment, it probably wouldn't look like I have on the right, but I already kind of know what this job really entails. First if I work for this company doing this, I'd know the company, I'd really know the role, I'd probably talk to other people in the role, so I already have a template. So why are you doing that? We already know that you just promoted Bill into this job, and we just hired Sally into a similar job. Why don't we look at it from that standpoint? We know the focus of the job is really collaboration. That doesn't even show up here. And I know part of it is they got to be the engineering liaison. So I would actually give a rough template of this and ask the manager to, what do you think of that? Then I always say this to the hiring manager. I said, hey, if I could show you someone who can do this work but doesn't have exactly the skills listed, would you at least see the person? I've never had a manager say no to that. I don't say, would you hire the person? I say, would you see the person? Then I even offer, hey, what I'll do is, and if they're real insistent, I said, okay, I'll show you a few people who meet the exact spec, the best I can find, and I'll show you a couple people I think are top performers who can do the work. And you compare them. It's never a comparison. Once I get them to agree to that. Now, the reality of it is that an individual recruiter has limited ability to what to do. You can work one job at a time, and then you have to do that. From my standpoint, the recruiting leader and the talent leader and the HR leader has to say, this makes no sense to do stuff on the left. I mean, that to me is how could an HR leader even think that they're going to find good people with people on the left? It makes no sense. So then you have to so I tend to work with I'd say mid-sized companies where we really implement this, let's say $1 billion to $3 billion companies. That's not, we also work with larger companies, but when I can work with a CEO directly or the VP HR who gets it, they say, of course. I mean, you look at Google's Project Oxygen. It said exactly what's on the right here. You look at the Gallup group, first break all the rules in the Q12. It's exactly the stuff on the right. Clarify expectations up front. It doesn't say maximize number of years of skills they've had. I mean, so you just think about all the research, all the logic, all the common sense has defined the work. There's even something it was in the New York Times today, or maybe it was one of the LinkedIn blog posts I can't remember, I just saw it this morning or yesterday, where it had, or I guess it was an article in the Wall Street Journal on stress. It says, how stressed are you in your job? Do you know exactly what you need to do? I mean, it was really the Q12, Gallup's Q12 converted to stress diagram. So it was kind of interesting that this is kind of common sense. And then managers then tell me, I don't have time to do this, you should know it. So I say, wait a second, I'm going to show you a candidate tomorrow who we've already agreed to interview. And when a candidate asks you what are they going to be doing, you're going to say you don't have time to tell them? Or if the candidate shows up 3 weeks from now starting, when are you going to actually tell the person when you've hired them, or are you ever going to tell the person when you hire what they're going to be doing? Oh yeah, I'll do it then. So why don't you tell me now so I can find people who are competent and motivated to do it? So you can't avoid it. It doesn't take any extra time. You can't avoid it. And not doing it is setting you up for mismatch on the, hey, I didn't know that was the job, which also then drives dissatisfaction and drives turnover. And to me, all those problems are solved when you define the work. And then this also opens up the pool to diversity candidates who obviously by definition don't have the background, older people who are perfectly competent and motivated to do this work, military vets who have done similar kinds of work, maybe not identical work. You just open up the pool to high potential people, and high potential people can do the work with less skills. In fact, I would say the highest potential people can do this work with the least amount of experience. And the bottom half has to have the most amount of experience to do it. So by defining all the work, you're actually targeting the bottom half. That's probably a little bit too much in the logic, and I certainly couldn't put that in an interesting, maybe I try to put it in a LinkedIn blog, but that was a long answer to a very important question. Any other questions here, JJ?
You know, one that...
You're getting a lot coming through.
Yeah, there's one that's kind of related, but what if the hiring manager has absolutely no idea what he wants or what the objectives of the job are?
Well, that's a very fair question. I mean, I've worked with many a company where I'm talking with the CEO or a VP marketing, and hey, we want to go launch a new product line in this, for example, this international, which that wasn't a company, but if I use that, hey, I don't know how to do that. I said, well, we need someone who can launch the business unit internationally. Now, they have to understand that at least at some level that they might not know the specifics of it. Hey, we need somebody who can take our product line and set up the whole logistics and distribution system internationally. Well, that's the big job. Now, underneath that, they have to put a plan together and probably put that plan together for a senior management team within 6 months. They obviously have to have a channel distribution plan and some organizational plan. So, I mean, I think most managers would have the general sense at the MBA level of what the big tasks are. They might not have the specifics, but they could say, hey, this is somebody who's taking on this new business unit internationally to launch our product overseas. They could put an outline together, and they would expect that person to deliver that. So I think defining the work is, even if you don't know it, putting a general outline still works. I've done that many a time. It's not really as, I mean, it does seem kind of hard, but if the manager can't even guide the person along, maybe that's not the right manager to do it, though. So I haven't really, but that's how I would do it, though. Any other thoughts, JJ? You want me to kind of, well, yeah, let me take one more, and then I'll go on, and we'll open it up again. We're going to open this up for the next half hour, so let's take one more right now.
Okay, great. So how do you test or evaluate, if you're interviewing a candidate, what bucket they fall into, if they're a thinker, a builder, et cetera, for a role?
Okay, that's a real fair question. That's not really the way I do it. I don't really care. This is where I think people perceive this to be a definition of the person. It's the definition of a job. Naturally, you think it's a definition of a person. So, for example, let's assume that I had, let me just go to here because I think this next slide kind of, I can at least use it, I think. So let's assume that the hiring manager told me, hey, this person's got to come up with a complete new business plan for Europe, which is a thinker role. I would just talk to the candidate. Let me just pick a candidate here. And you don't have to actually answer this question, I'm just looking for names here. So I talked to Alex. Hey, Alex, you know, this project requires the person to really develop a long-range business plan to launch our product in Europe. We're expecting $10 million next year and ramping up to $50 million in 3 years. Then this person's going to actually implement it. But let's walk me through something we've actually accomplished, something like that. So I would then, that's the most significant question of all time, the most important interview question of all time. The way I interview people is now that I have 5 or 6 performance objectives defining the job, I just ask the candidate to tell me what he or she has done in each of those areas. So I'm obviously getting at thinking skills, but I'm really looking, that was more the bridge to figure out the project of thinking is, hey, you got to launch this new product. Now, Alex might be a great thinker, but he hasn't thought of it at that level, and that's why he might, number one, he might be a good thinker, but that doesn't mean he's going to get hired. He's got to be a good thinker doing the work that needs to be done. So by categorizing these things as buckets allows you to figure out the actual work, and you can't lose sight of the actual work, and a lot of people do. Not all builders can turn around a company, but you do need a builder to turn around a company. So if Alvin, if I need someone to turn around, hey, here at this company, this division is underperforming, we've got 2 years to capture it, we've got to rebuild the market, walk me through you've ever turned them out a business unit. Now all of a sudden, I can figure out, so the fact that Alex is a builder, and he's built this is fine, but let's assume that Allison's also a builder, but she hasn't done, she's just built a, she's built a sales team that had never existed before. She has never turned around a company. So that's why I say you got to understand the work behind it. The title is just a bridge. It's not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end. That's actually a good article, JJ. It's a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. And then people get, oh, I'm all of these. Just like this guy is an ENTJ. Well, what'd you do? It's not the fact that you're an ENTJ, you're improver, you're all of them. It's what you do with those that requires you to do a job fit. They're not universal. It's the job behind it that really counts. Let me kind of show this chart here just so you guys can see it. I think this might actually have some questions here. I'm not positive though. Yeah, so here's some ideas and questions. So let me just kind of make the first one. This is the big thing. If I had to just make a point, and this is what I tell managers, define the job before you define the person. And if you don't know the job, the person who you're hiring better know it. That means the person's got to learn it, they got to deliver it, they got to do probably all of these things. If you already have a job that just has to be improved, well, the focus is going to be on improving. So define the job before you define the person, to me, is the most important, is foundational. The other question is, can a person be more than one type? Yeah, if you're only one type, you got to be pretty narrow. Here, let's take a look at this. So you get these young kids out of MBA school. They're not so young anymore. When I got mine, I was a young kid, and we all thought we could do anything. You could think about it, but you couldn't deliver. So you're just good at planning and strategizing, but not at implementing. And I remember, I was 26 or so, and I did this analysis. I was working for a consumer electronics company. It's a cool job. Now, I was actually 20. I was a director. It was my best job. It was obviously many years ago. Rockwell had this consumer calculator company. It was really when consumer handheld electronics came out. It was a 2K chip, 2K. We couldn't even divide. I mean, it was, but we thought it was pretty cool anyway at the time. So we just acquired this other company. It was called Unicom, and they had like, I don't know what the number was, but $10 or $12 million of receivables. And I just was the analyst. I was doing it. Say, oh, we got to get $6-7 million of cash out of this. So I said, hey, let's just reduce receivables from 300 days or 200 days down to 50 days, and we got it, which was easy to do on paper. So the president of the company says, Lou, big mouth, you do it. It was hard. We had to hire 50 clerks to figure this out. It was impossible. But it was a good learning lesson not to open my mouth too quickly. Nonetheless, thinking is just part of it. You got to deliver the goods too, and it could be, in that one, we had to start from scratch. If you already had a system that wasn't working, hey, that's an improver role. And you have to have some skills. Sometimes you need the skills. Sometimes I'll think people can learn the skills quickly. So yes, a person is typically more than one type, and they always have to be. Good, but I think what happens is a lot of people hire people who talk a good game but don't deliver. So I like people who can talk a game and deliver a good game. So I look for both. Any other questions coming up, JJ? Because I've got a couple of my own, but so I want to just make sure. Now let's make most of the rest of this questions from them.
Okay, let me look here.
Let me take one here, JJ, which is John's. Yeah, so, and John, you have to do this. And everybody who is in an OFCC compliant, who has EEO or any kind of compliance issues, go to our website, and it's which is louadlergroup.com. Under the contact form, go to Contact Us. You'll see a button that says, I want to see the white paper from David Goldstein. And you'll automatically you'll be bugged by us for 3 emails, but after that, you don't have to do anything else. Or you could buy my book, which has the white paper in it. I asked David Goldstein, I'm going to go back to this deck right here. Oops, stop this. I do this all the time. Okay, I want to go back to here. Okay, so I asked David Goldstein from Littler Mendelson, which is the largest labor law firm and the most prestigious labor law firm in the U.S., to review the book, The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. And when I first taught, and this guy is one of the number 1 or 2 litigator for OFCCP in the country, number 1. Number 2, Alyssa Gold, who's Horvath, whose partner is they're both great people. So I just said, and Alyssa had already reviewed the content, so she knew the stuff, but she couldn't do it, review the book. So David did. He said, well, I don't think it's going to work, Lou. I don't see how you could do it. He came back and said, this is OFCCP compliant. He said, this is OFCCP compliant. It says objective criteria. Performance objectives are equally as objective as skills. And this is what David said, more importantly, they're also predictive. Being able to do work like this is both predictive and objective and full compliance. In addition, he said, why would you advertise on skills? He said it makes no sense. It makes no sense to advertise, at least advertise on what work people are going to do. He says it's perfectly legal, you still have to do the reporting, but it's more, in fact, he basically contended it's in more compliance. So thank you, John, for letting me set up that question here. It was almost like a softball, I think, but I appreciate it. JJ, anything else there as I kind of let you go through that? And I can look at some too, so.
Yeah, most of the questions are regarding hiring managers. What do you do if you have a hiring manager who is problematic? How do you work with a candidate to see the value of the job despite the challenges?
Okay, let me kind of, I'm reading some of these questions.
Okay, great.
So just only because I highlighted this from Orland. It says, what do you do if you interview a candidate that is too good for the manager of the job? Okay, I actually like that question because I'm going to be interviewed for some TV show, some local show about the unemployed. And she said, do you think there's discrimination in the overemployed or the older people or the unemployed? I said, that's a regulatory issue. When you don't define the work properly, you set yourself up for all these kinds of problems. So let me now, Orland, this is going to be a long answer to a short question. When I meet a candidate who's really good, so let's assume that I'm doing this job in Italy or Europe, setting it up, and I meet this guy, Orlin. Hey, Orlin, you've done, not only have you done something in Europe that's launching this new business and very, very successful, but you have done around the world. I just don't think the job is big enough for you. Now, what I'd like to do is at least engage in a conversation with you. And it's possible, because I know we're going to be launching this worldwide, and I know we'd have to set it up, but it would be more than a hiring manager. I also have to get the VP involved, and even probably the president. So I don't know that it makes sense to go forward now, but let me see what I can do. But I really am impressed with your background, and I think you are real strong. So that's how I would do it if the candidate was too good for the job. And I have actually changed jobs. That's why I don't like to focus on having and getting, because frequently, my search firm made over 1,500 placements when I was there full time, and I sold it off 10, 12 years ago. I would say half those jobs or more got changed based on the person. Oh, Orlin, yeah, let me just see what we can do. Oh, let's bring you in and we'll set the plan up, and hey, yeah, let's see what we can do. So on the other hand, now I have someone who's too good for, now I remember this one. It was a company in Southern California. It was, I got the woman out of Rainbird, she was a manager of logistics. And she was a remarkable woman. She was a manager level. The director that I was trying to get into logistics to place her there was kind of an idiot. And she said, I just can't work with that guy. And she was really better than the guy. There's no question about it. So I talked to the VP operations, and I knew the CFO there. And I said, this lady's great. She's a world-class person. This is like 15 years ago. You just got to intervene here. If you want to hire her, and they all liked her. I said, she just won't work for this guy. So they both, the CFO and the VP operations, recognized how good she was. She set a plan up. They intervened all the time, and in about a year and a half, she became the director of materials and logistics. So sometimes you do have to intervene. But that's why when you focus on doing and having, the world just changes. The job changes, the person changes. I've had so many candidates, I can't take that. I remember my biggest search was number 2 person in a publicly traded company. The guy was making twice the compensation, and it was a bigger corporation. And I said, hey, Fred, you're just too big for this job. And I remember him saying, Lou, I'm interested. The reason, and he said, I'll take a cut. It wasn't about the money. It turned out that in my job, it was a publicly traded company. He could go to a smaller company, get his street creds to have taken work. He was number 1 guy in a public, or he was going to be number 2 in my client, but in a year and a half he could be number 1, and you'd be number 1 for a publicly traded company. And that was his goal. He said, hey, I got to give up money to get that. I'll do it. Well, he gave up money to do it, took basically a 50% cut. 6 months later, a year later, he was made the CEO. 2 years later, he leveraged that to work for a bigger company. So that's why I say when you focus on having and getting, you just filter out so many opportunities of having a discussion. And so I again, long answer to a relatively short question, but an important one. Anybody else have some questions there, JJ?
Yeah.
Try to make them short and pithy, okay?
Okay, I'll do my best. So this is from both the candidates and hiring and recruiter side. How do you convince a hiring manager that the candidate has what it takes to do the job if it doesn't look like they have what it takes to do the job on paper, but they do have the skills?
Great question. I got it. And I remember having this question with a good friend of mine many, many years ago, because he was open-minded. As a guy I had worked with, I think at Rockwell. I left Rockwell and I worked with another company, but then I became a recruiter. And I had this conversation, and he was a great guy, real open-minded. And I said, you got to look at it's not the job itself, it's what's behind the job. And I came up, and I can't remember, I called it the 6 S's, but I can't remember. I said, you got to look at the job from a complexity standpoint. Let's assume it was builder. This guy had built something but was totally different. So I said, you got to look at it from the scale and scope of the job. The staff size, how many people are involved, how broad is it, how sophisticated was it, what was the level of infrastructure and systems involved there. So I said, look at it from not, break it down and read between the lines of, hey, is the decisions the person's making equally as complex? Is the market and the challenges equally as complex? When I deal with salespeople, they say, oh, I got to have someone selling to this exact, in the same industry. I said, no, you don't. You need someone who can sell to C-level officers. And obviously, they got to sell a complex product. They're dealing with complex issues. So if someone's selling a software system to C-level CIOs and CFOs at Fortune 200 companies, could sell a hardware system to the same people. Obviously, they have to learn the hardware system, but the methodology of solution selling is the same. So you got to break it down into the size, scope, scale, the complexity of the decision, the size of the team, the structure, the sophistication of the company. So, I mean, that's obviously not a complete answer, but it can be done. So you do need a good recruiter, and you do need an aware hiring manager who's open to do that. Now, here's a VP who's, let me take this question while you're looking for something, JJ. I just saw one from Hannah. How do you deal with a VP who feels challenged? Again, that was pretty much this woman I had. I had it, now, only because I, as a recruiter, let me just say this, as a recruiter, and I developed this process, I started as a recruiter in 1978, already had 10 years in industry, and I never used a job description ever. So I just made it a rule, me as a recruiter, you do it my way or I don't do the search, and it worked. And actually, so it was pretty in your face, but people realized, hey, it works, so why not do it? Then I wrote the book about it, after trying it out for 20 years. I said, this actually works, I'll write a book about it. So that's what the 2 books came out. But the point I'm making there is that, I got to find the question again. Oh, the person was brilliant. Like this woman I had from Rainbird, I just had to intervene, and because I had the whole company buy into the concept, they realized that they wanted to raise a talent bar. There was a bottleneck there, and they had to do something. You can't do everything as a recruiter. You can't do everything yourself. You sometimes have to intervene and get higher authority involved there, and that's what I did. Else I would have lost the deal. And I placed probably half a dozen people with that same client because I knew the VP Ops and the CFO. So, and then eventually the president. They implemented the process completely, and it worked. Any other questions there, JJ?
Yeah, lots and lots of questions, Lou. How do you use this model to tie into your company culture and then determine if a candidate is a cultural fit for your company?
That's a real good question. I don't know that I've actually thought of the answer that way. And JJ knows I haven't because she's on every one of the classes we do. I look at cultural fit in 3 ways. I call it the hiring formula for success, which is written in the book. And I don't really want to, this is not necessarily an infomercial for the book. So let me answer it the way I would do it and then see if it relates to this. When I look at cultural fit, I look at really 3 dimensions. Fit with the job itself. Is the candidate motivated to do the work? If they're not motivated to do the work, it doesn't matter if they fit with the culture. The second, so certainly defining the work this way, I want people who are motivated and competent to do the work this way. The second component of fit, and I think in cultural fit to me is and the most important one, is the style of the hiring manager meshing with the style of the candidate. Because let's be real frank, most of the culture of a company is your boss. If you don't like your boss, it doesn't matter if you love the company, you're not going to hang in there. And let me just say this, guys, that's really why I left corporate America. At a very young age, I was running a company. I was doing very well, and I loved it. I was working 80 hours a week. My wife didn't like it, and my family didn't like it, but I loved it. But I hated my boss, and that was really the reason I left. And I just started using these recruiters, and that seemed to be a better life. My wife met him, and she said, you got to become a recruiter, and I'm still married 40-plus years later. So fit with the boss is essential. And as a recruiter, when I looked at why all the candidates in my search firm failed, we had a 1-year guarantee. Maybe in 20 years, 5%, 75 people failed. But 2/3 of those, they didn't like working with the boss. The other third, it wasn't the job you promised me. Those are the 2 issues. So cultural fit with the boss. The third one, I look at cultural fit, is really the rate of change. If you really think about cultural fit, the dominant factor on cultural fit is how fast the company is growing or not. I mean, a startup is a different culture than a company going through rapid growth, that's going through maturity, that's going through stagnation. So I just use the corporate life cycle to figure out that. And in the early phases of a company, it's thinker and builder. In the more mature phases of the company, it's improver and producer. But then in fact, that's how the goal came in. I started to say, hey, as you move up the corporate life cycle, you got to have a balance of every single person think of these to keep the company sustainable. Now, that wasn't necessarily my idea. That was the Adizes life cycle model. He was at UCLA, and I read a lot of his stuff. I think I met him once, but I'm not positive. So then I just said, okay, let's kind of figure out if we can get people, so rather than a company reaching stagnation, can you find people to prevent that so it can continue to be a healthy company even though it was big? So I hope that answers the question. I know it's more complex than that, but that's the essence of the answer. Okay, we got only a few minutes left, JJ. Let me just put what I have here to see if we'll cover it, and then we'll answer some more questions. We do have more time. I just want to make sure I So define a person. Okay, and again, let me just make this statement. I think it's real important. And this is the reason I don't like DISC or Myers-Briggs, or this for defining people. None of those things define competencies. They define preferences. And I remember the reason I got bugged about this is I took a Myers-Briggs or maybe a DISC many years ago, and somebody said, well, you couldn't be an analyzer. I said, well, you can't. It's a bunch of hokum. I got an engineering degree. I aced out the only person my whole college that aced out every single math class. I just don't prefer to do that. I'd rather drink beer and party and play intramurals, but if I need to, I can be an analyst. So I realized how stupid these things were. And then when this guy told me he was an ENTJ, that's what he wasn't any good at it. So it's not about competencies, it's about preferences. So from a job standpoint, it really is, hey, you've got to be competent doing this work. So I just have to make that general statement. I just made the comparison to the DISC. It's different. They probably overlap, and you could do it. To me, it would be an exercise and a waste of time, but maybe not. But well, on the other hand, let me make this other statement. From a organizational communication standpoint, team building standpoint, understanding how you build people, I think DISC, MTBI, MBTI, these four, those are very valuable. But selecting people, and that I think it's wrong. So let me make this other statement. They're confirming indicators, not predictive indicators. Confirming indicators. The best recruiter, we had great recruiters in my company. I can think one of the best, if not the best, was the soft, everybody else, we were dominant, we were D's and I's, no question about it. Billing, big billers. One of the best guy we had, I would say it was clearly the top 10%, was the soft-spoken guy, easy to get along with, but tough as nails. You just don't see it. So it was never the style, it was the performance. The guy was a great recruiter. He just didn't map it. So I just tend to look at those as they're good, useful communicating tools, team-building tools, but I think they're overrated, including this. I don't think you can say, hey, I'm all for. Yeah, okay. How good are you at it? You might be all for in a certain niche, but that doesn't mean they're universal. Now let me also say this, just to set the stage here for some level of confusion. When you look at how people grow and develop, and I've been around a lot of years, guys, so I've talked to people like you, not maybe even you. I've talked to people when you were 25, 30, and track you 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I can almost predict who's going to be successful or not very quickly just by watching this for so many years. Seeing people come out of college, and I know now they're great people are out of college and they kind of faltered, and great people that came out of college and they're still on the rise. But what's interesting is people start as producers, and then they kind of evolve into improver, builder, and thinker. It just tends to be this bottoms-up approach. Companies, however, evolve the other way. Somebody comes up with a great idea, they try it out, they improve it, and they repeat it. So companies grow from top to bottom, people grow from bottom to top. And that creates some natural friction. As companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, the improver-producer role becomes like gravity, and it becomes this bureaucracy, and people defend their position. And then all the thinkers and builders leave. And then pretty soon, the builders take the best improvers and bring them over here, and the producers that are growing and evolving get hired. And those that don't grow and hire kind of just have this bureaucracy and break rules. I've got this one client, I know maybe on the line. We try to have a paperless office. So I signed a contract yesterday. You haven't seen this yet, JJ, you'll get it. A digital contract. I get a call back from procurement, you must print 2 copies and send it back. Well, I have a printer. How am I supposed to do that? Now, I was thinking, JJ, of sending to the person and said, could you print 2 copies and send them back to me? But that's probably not, I shouldn't do that. But I'm thinking of it. Okay, so what are some other questions here, JJ? Well, let's kind of go here. Open up some questions.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions. Steve would like to a little bit more detail about each of the 4 groups and the people that would be in those. So that's one.
I don't understand that. Okay, again, it's less about people and more about the work that people need to do. So if I go back to this, which is a fair question. I mean, it's not, if I just had to make the general statement, producers in a job, salespeople who are selling a transactional product or going through a process are producers. engineers using design tools are producers. That doesn't mean they don't do other stuff, but if the bulk of their job, that would be a producer job. Someone in a call center is a producer. Someone on a production line is a supervisor. A supervisor of a process is a producer. An improver would be someone who, and it could be the same person, an improver is someone who manages that processes and got to make it better. So if you're implementing Six Sigma on an existing process, that would clearly be an improver. Could be a team that needs, hey, you got a bunch of, you're coaching and developing the team, so you have to be an improver manager to do it. So you could be both the improver and the producer. A builder would be somebody who is taking something that hasn't been done before and trying to make it work the first time. Could be an R&D, an inventor, someone who's coming up with a new production line, starting off in Skunk Works and, you know, kind of not stuck up in the bureaucracy of what you already have. The blend between the builder and improver could be both. Hey, you got to take that product and you got to bring it into reality. So you got to figure out how do we do it in our existing production line. A thinker is somebody who's really now I'm hoping there's some thinkers at Apple left who can really come up with big, bold products that are different, as opposed to just improving existing products. You got all these existing products. So you got this idea of, hey, once you have this is what's called the innovator's dilemma by, I can't think of the guy's name, Christensen, but it's, hey, you got to protect your asset base, what you already got. You don't want to cannibalize your business. So thinkers go, hey, how do we come up with a whole new business line that's going to complement what we have but not compete with it? So that would be the builder. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's how I look at it.
Okay, great. Summer has some questions about timing. So how much time does it generally take to turn a job description into the objective performance profile description? And then also, how much time do you devote to that intake meeting with the hiring manager to get all the information?
They're both real good questions. Let me just say this. I don't think it takes any extra time to do it, to make one. Maybe it takes an hour and a half the first time you do it, but you can do it, but they can do it anyway. They can do it when that person gets started. You can do it during the onboarding. You can do it during the performance management. So it would be criminal not to do it before you hire the person. I mean, you're affecting someone's life. You can't. How can you not tell a person this is the job without knowing what the job is? So to me, it's mandatory that to be done. To me, that makes no sense. So if it took 3 weeks, who cares? So I just say it doesn't matter how long it takes. I know people put that in there, but if you're going to tell the person eventually that you're going to do it, it's no extra time. But rationally speaking, it takes about an hour and a half. However, if I was doing it with a manager, I would work in with, as a recruiter, and if you're doing these jobs, you just you spend 20 minutes, hey, here's what I think the job is, and you give the hiring manager 20 minutes to look at it. They'll then kind of say, oh, that looks pretty good, and I'll add this and add that to it. And that's another 20 minutes. So basically, it's kind of filtered in throughout the day where a manager finally figures it out. So maybe that's 2 or 3 meetings over 10 or 15 minutes. But what's real important, I as a recruiter, I force them, even if I know how to do it because I've done so many, I don't even tell the manager. I just kind of roughly, I even get it wrong. So, well, you think it's this? No, it's not that, it's this. Oh, good, yeah, I'm glad you told me that. Is this more important than that? No, once a manager owns it, their natural tendency is not to judge the candidate on first impressions and skills, but have they done anything? Hey, I was just talking to a recruiter. Alvin, you've got to kind of introduce this new product line. I was just talking about this yesterday. This is a pretty cool product. We're going to be launching this new product in Europe. Walk me through how you've ever done something like that. There's this natural tendency when the manager owns the job to ask the right kinds of questions, not to make judgments about first impressions, not to make judgments about skills, not to make judgments about how old the person is or they're unemployed or not, but, well, hey, if the person can do the work. If they can't do the work, they shouldn't be hired. As far as I'm concerned, if they can do the work, and this is the legal brief, if they can do the work, it's perfectly legal. I don't care if the person's old or young, black or white, green or yellow, physically challenged or not, unemployed or not. If they can do the work, they deserve the job. And New York City just came up with a law, you can't discriminate against the unemployed. What a stupid law. That's just this put regulations in to solve a problem without knowing what the problem is. The problem is you got a bad job description. And it's this continued focus, so the fact that it takes long is, I'd say, it's because we try to make this easy. If hiring is number one, let's get it right. Let's not try to do it quickly. Let's try to do it right. And if you had the system right, it would take no longer than it does to do it today. I'm going on a rant here, guys, because I'm getting ready for this interview.
That's fine, Lou. But actually, to that point, are there some specific questions a recruiter can ask a hiring manager to help them guide them through that shift in thinking?
Well, in the book, I mean, the book is a few bucks, guys. This is not this. Yes, there's a whole script in there of step-by-step instructions. What I ask a hiring manager is just what I said before. What does this person need to do to be successful? If you're going to give this person a year from now a performance review and they ace the performance review, top person you ever hired for this job, what would they have accomplished? So I get them to think about outcomes, not skills. And if a manager says to me, well, they need 5 years of experience in this industry, I say, what does that look like on the job? Then I just go through each of the 4 steps. What's the repeatable skills? What's the improver things they need? What are the problems they're going to solve? They have to think out of the box or any strategic issues. That way I cover the whole job that way. But I mean, I have to say, there are some managers who get it, they say, oh my God, finally a recruiter knows what he's talking about. And when I talk to candidates, I mean, we do have candidates on the line here, the worst thing that candidates think about the recruiters is they don't know the job. The worst thing, we train more managers than recruiters. We have a program, performance-based hiring for managers. And if recruiters are in the room, I say, what's your big problem with the recruiters? They don't know the job. Now, of course, recruiters in the room says, well, you won't tell me the job, and we have a good banter back and forth. But the recruiter has to know the job. You're affecting a person's life. How could you possibly put a person in a job by box checking their skills? I mean, in my mind, particularly when you think about 83% of the market is passive. They're not looking for another job. So if you want to get those 83%, you better know the job. And you better not box check their compensation. For 20 years, all I did was place passive candidates. Never placed an active candidate once responding to an ad. Never had enough money in the budget. But somehow we closed the deal because it was a great career move. So that was really the process we used here. Let me kind of just summarize what we've got going on here in the last minute. If anybody wants to hang on a minute or two, I can do it, Jade. We have a sneak peek of all our programs on May 21st. So you go to louadlergroup.com and you'll see that. We have a recruiter boot camp for recruiters. If you're in Houston, you can come to that. You'll see all the details on Lou Adler Group. That's next week in Houston. We have an online program for boot camp for recruiters that starts every month. It's in June. We have a hiring manager program, which I guess the next one's not till the end of June, but you'll get an email with all this stuff. The book, budurl.com/essential guide for hiring. Just look it up. You'll kind of get a sense of what it is. If you've done some hashtag, I don't know if anybody did, hashtag for jobs, so see if there's any stuff there. Any last questions or two, JJ? Hopefully this was helpful, guys. I don't know, I assume it was for some of you. I tend to write like this, I tend to talk like this, and I treat my candidates a lot better because I know how serious it is. Managers need to be hit in the head, and I'm not afraid to do that. Now, surely first impressions. No, first impressions don't matter at all. There's not one, Omar, I'm sorry to say, it is the most silly thing, and everybody believes this. They do not matter. There's not one study that ever shows that a first impression matters on performance. I mean, you can't tell me that there are people in your company that don't look that great who are top performers. And you can't tell me there are people who have great first impressions who aren't top performers. All first impressions do is affect your judgment in 30 seconds, and they're always wrong. They create more mistakes based on first impression than any other reason. They do not matter, and yet people somehow believe, even in the book, I can't think of the book, the guy who says it, he says they don't matter. But people misread, I can't think it's, I wish I could come up with the book of Blink, I guess it was Blink or something. They don't matter. He even says it there, but people misread it because they had this bias that it matters. All a first impression does is bias your judgment. When you like somebody who asks easy questions and you don't like somebody who asks hard questions, and you miss the opportunity to hire some great people. So that's my position, and I proved it year after year, and there's not one piece of research that actually shows that first impressions matter. Not one, and yet people believe it. So I appreciate you asking that question, Omar. You don't like my answer, but they don't matter. What I always tell people is wait 30 minutes before you measure first impression. Measure first impression at the end of the interview when you're not seduced by it. But I appreciate you asking the question. One other last question, JJ. We must have lost some people here.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of them actually. When you were talking about people and companies evolving differently and it creates friction, is there any way to retain great employees when that happens?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, it's first you got to understand the cause of the friction. Now, let's say this: if you have a real bureaucracy, because of just, hey, the best ideas are being thrown out in the weeds. You can't do it. Google has tried to do it, and I think they're reasonably successful at it. Let's be real frank, Microsoft isn't successful. All the best people have left. There's no reason why good people want to go there. It is a culture that's stifled. I mean, you look at, I've just read the thing about Windows 8 was a piece of junk. I'm sorry, guys, if you're from Microsoft here. I've known many recruiters there. They've all left because it was frustrating. If management doesn't believe that talent is number one, what happens is producer improver model overtakes everything. They think they become arrogant. They think this is the greatest place to work in the world. And they let all the thinkers and builders get away. So there is even in Not Good to Great, it was a book by Tom Peters, where he said when you really thought about how companies could, and it probably even in the Innovator's Dilemma, it was the idea of creating a skunk works where the thinkers and builders could work alone without being compromised by what was going on day to day. So yes, you can do it at the grand scale. You can also do it at the project level. There are certain managers who take their real big projects and they put the people in a different room and let them have some time off. So that's the short answer to a very, very important and very complex issue, but it certainly can be done, and I think it should be done. That's why companies eventually die, and then to me, I could have predicted what was going on at Microsoft 10 years ago, and I heard what they were doing because I knew a lot of recruiters up there. Eventually, if you're not hiring the best people in the world, the company's going to die. When the infrastructure defines what you do, you're already losing the thinkers and the builders. Let's take one last one, JJ, here, and we'll try to have another one of these, but certainly your comments are great, guys.
Okay, great. So do you incorporate this process through the entire recruiting process, including the phone screen? And if so, what does the phone screen, before you actually do the full interview, what does that phone screen consist of?
Well, when I do it, and I think that's in the book, which JJ knows, so she's cherry picking these. JJ's worked for us 10 years, so she knows this stuff inside out. You can answer that question, JJ, but when I do a phone screen, I first go through the basic work history, and I look at their link. I can just look at their LinkedIn profile to see if what I call the achiever pattern. Is this person progressing? Are they always in the top quartile of their group? If they're top quartile in any job or their job, I want to know that person. Those are people that I'm going to place or connect with at some time in the future. Then what I do is, if I know the job, let's assume it was, let me pick somebody down in the list that doesn't start with letter A. So if I was talking to Jenny Wall, or Jenny, I got enough Jennies there. So if I was talking to Jenny, I'd say, hey Jenny, I like your background. Let me kind of tell you what we're doing here. We're really launching this new business line in Europe. It's probably a critical dominant thing. I like your background, not necessarily a perfect fit, but have you ever done anything similar to that? So that's really what my first 15 minutes would just general review, see if the person's in the top quartile of their peer group, and if they're a rough fit. If they are, I just say, hey, I just convert it to a question. Because I know the work. I'd say, Jenny, this is something we do. Now I get Jenny excited. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Let me tell you about what I've done. So it's this mutual dialogue going back and forth. And the thing I tell recruiters is, don't sell the job. Sell the discussion about a career move. Even when I talk to a candidate, I say, hey, Jenny, would you be open to talk about something that was a great career move? Everybody says yes, of course. So don't sell them the job. Hey, wait, let me review your background. Let me kind of see if this makes sense, and let's take one step at a time. And if you want to go after passive candidates, and you guys know this, if you make the decision, it's going to be, it's a great career move. When you know it's a great career move, hey, and we just did a survey, 75% of the people said that if the job was a real significant career move, they would take a modest or minimal increase in salary. 75%. And yet when they first talk to a recruiter, it's what's the compensation? And too many candidates and recruiters alike put this roadblock in front of them before they even get to the real discussion, which makes no sense to me. Hopefully this was helpful, guys. Hopefully you'll come back. Hopefully, I don't want to push the book too much. It really is a pretty good book, but you have to decide for that. And hopefully you continue to read the stuff on LinkedIn, because I certainly enjoy doing it, and I certainly enjoy doing this. Thanks very much, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou, and thanks everyone for joining us. You will be getting a follow-up email in your inbox, so be looking for that, and we look forward to seeing you at future ADLA Group webinars. Have a great afternoon.